Good evening. I hope everyone is well and safe in your homes or wherever you find yourself watching this program. Welcome to tonight's program, Lift Every Voice, 250 Years of African American Poetry, hosted by the Library of America in partnership with the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. I'm Novella Ford, Associate Director of Public Programs and Exhibitions at the Schomburg Center, where we are celebrating 95 years as one of the world's leading institutions devoted to research, preservation, and exhibition of materials focused on global Black experiences. We have over 11 million items that illuminate the richness of Black history and culture, and we are home to the archival collections of poets like Jane Cortez, Claude McKay, Brad Johnson, Maya Angelou, and recently, Wanda Coleman. Many of those poets that I mentioned you can find in the book that we are also celebrating, but I will say more about that in a while. When we reopen to the public, one of the special things that I miss about being in our building is being able to visit the ashes of poet Langston Hughes, which are interred at the center of a cosmogram with the words of Hughes's poem, The Negro Speaks a River. Alongside me, we have Max Rudin, the president and publisher of Library of America, who we will hear from in just a moment. We are both excited for this evening of poetry featuring some familiar names and others that will send you exploring your virtual and physical bookshelves. We are joined by a phenomenal group of poets who have honed their craft in the spirit of Sankofa, will help us move between the past and the present to understand Black poetic traditions. One note I want to make is, unfortunately, Nikky Finney will not be able to join us this evening as the storms that are happening in South Carolina has made her unable to do so. So we do wish her well. Tonight's celebration is anchored by the publication of the anthology African American Poetry, 250 Years of Struggle and Song, which is edited by poet and Schomburg Center Director Kevin Young. The anthology is available to order online at the Schomburg shop. We also have a nice bundle of books that includes the anthology as well as some of the collections from the authors who are participating this evening. During the program, we will hear a rendition of James Weldon Johnson, and really his brother as well, a rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing, also known as the Black National Anthem, performed by saxophonist Kamasi Washington. As it is the poets who sound the alarm, raise their voices, and implore us to march on till victory is won. So I hope that you watch or listen with an open heart, share the conversation using the hashtag #LiftEveryVoice, and check in on our chat where we will offer links to additional resources. I hope you enjoy the evening, and Max, I turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Nadella. Hi, I'm Max Rudin, president and publisher of Library of America, the nonprofit organization dedicated to publishing authoritative new volumes of great American writers and to keeping the many-voiced American literary tradition a vital part of our culture. Tonight's program kicks off Lift Every Voice, a year-long nationwide celebration of the 250-year tradition of African American poetry. With signature events in New York tonight and in the coming months in Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Kansas City, readings, performances, and moderated conversations at public libraries around the country, a revelatory new anthology edited by Kevin, and a new website, africanamericanpoetry.org, with video, audio, and other resources. Lift Every Voice aims to highlight the richness and diversity of African American poetic imagination and its central place in American poetry. Lift Every Voice is directed by Library of America in partnership with the Schomburg Center and with libraries, arts organizations, and bookstores in all 50 states. It is supported by 3 funders to whom we are deeply grateful: the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and Emerson Collective. We'll be hearing shortly from the president of the Mellon Foundation, poet Elizabeth Alexander. This year, we've experienced both the pandemic and the largest racial justice protests in American history. In momentous times, great poems speak to us with new profundity. Deep calls unto deep, as the psalmist says. A poetic tradition of vitality, resistance, resilience, humor, and creativity in the face of often crushing hardship has much to offer our moment. We hope Lift Every Voice can be a source of discovery, renewal, and joy. And now, please welcome the Chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities, John Ptsd. 'd. 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 'd
Hello, I'm John Ptsd, Chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities. It's my great pleasure to help kick off the Library of America's Lift Every Voice celebration of African American poetry. NEH has awarded more than $5 million to support the library's books, including authoritative editions of Zora Neale Hurston, William Faulkner, Richard Wright, George Washington, and Abraham Lincoln. NEH is proud to help bring a new, groundbreaking book, African American Poetry, 250 Years of Struggle and Song, to public libraries across the country. These online and in-person events will illuminate this vital poetic tradition and its role in and dialogue with American history. Carefully selected by Kevin Young, this indispensable new anthology affirms the centrality of African American culture to the story of our nation and invites us all to learn, discuss, and celebrate what June Jordan so aptly called the difficult miracle of Black poetry in America. Enjoy.
I think the Lift Every Voice project is really important at this moment because we're in a moment of change and also of looking back. It's the 400th anniversary of 1619 when the first African Americans came as enslaved peoples to what became the United States. Thinking of 250 years, I started thinking of it as a quarter of a millennium. And suddenly it's a long while when you start to think of that African-American tradition. And the tradition is so big, it can barely fit in one book. And in a way, that's why we need all these other ways to think of it. We need readers and we need hearing it aloud. You can't hear this poetry and not think of all the voices that have come before. And even the title, Lift Every Voice, thinks about that quality, that every voice is important, that each and every breath and each and every song and each and every poem speaks to all of us. The poets have often been the first to say it and the first to be there, to name where we were, to name our condition, to talk about masks and pain, but also joy and pleasure. And all those things are found in this anthology.
So anthologies are incredibly important. I think that they're important for readers, and I'm always recommending when people say, which poets should I read? I send them to anthologies because I think that to be able to thumb through, to be able to have an anthology that's a companion that you look through at your leisure, and that then when you find something that you love, it sends you to something else. There's a real activeness to anthologies that I think is very important. And when you think about African American poetry anthologies, when you think about a tradition that is so rich and powerful, but that has also been marginalized, sometimes our anthologies are where our poets and poems have been kept safe, have been preserved. Books of poetry that are long, long, long out of print or that might have been produced in very, very small quantities, those voices, those spirits, those souls live in words in those anthologies. The titles that Kevin has chosen, I love them because they're evocative, and that even though I'm very happy that he decided to make a chronological anthology, I think that actually it matters to understand things in order, but that there is not real thematizing, I think is very powerful, but rather these kind of evocative titles that let you think about all of the mystery and complexity and contradiction and dynamism and surprise that is part of Black identity.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed? We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come, treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
So Lift Every Voice and Sing is, we just thought about it as a poem, but it is a poem that I know intimately as a song, as the Negro National Anthem. And so I think what's interesting about reading it as a poem and as the page and the lines suggest that it be read, that's a little bit differently from how you're guided to sing it once it's set to music. But I think what's amazing about it as a song is that, again, the interplay of the music and the words, I think, directs you to stand up straight, directs you to stand and feel proud and say, this is what we have been through, to stand together. This is what we must remember about what it means to be proud Black people.
Hi, I'm Kevin Young, Director of the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, and it's such a pleasure to be with you tonight. I think back to starting this anthology, and I want to thank, before I get going, Max Rudin and the team at Library of America and their support and this journey, which, like I said, has been about 6 years ago. And I also want to thank Novella and Kalila and the team at the Schomburg Center for making this virtual event happen. As you can imagine, we had a much splashier food-filled event planned for you, but I hope you're enjoying your own food and beverage wherever you are and celebrating with us this anthology, but also this long tradition. I say the anthology took 6 years, but really I could say it took 250 years, because as I started to work on it, I realized that's the duration of the publishing of poetry in this country. Phyllis Wheatley started publishing 250 years ago, her first book in 1773, Poems on Various Subjects, really kicks off the tradition. And as I talk about in the introduction to the book, it really names a lot of the things that we now think of as part of African-American poetry, from history to memory, from community to myth. She's also, I think, a poet who, just by her very writing, is engaging in protest. And as we talk tonight with some wonderful poets, I hope we can think about some of those themes with them and think aloud with you about how this rich tradition has grown up around us and supported us. I'm looked over by, among other things, Bob Kaufman, the wonderful poet, who is, for me, certainly someone, a touchstone. And one of my goals in doing this book was to really discover poets, but also to uncover poets we know of, but we may not get to see much of. I think Elizabeth Alexander, who spoke so eloquently about the use of anthologies, and as she called them, anthology activism, helps us think about the ways that an anthology like James Weldon Johnson's, which very much influenced this one, thinks about the long tradition and the ways that we're connecting and collecting poetry to each other. And for me, someone like Bob Kaufman or Anne Spencer, poets who we may know of but not know enough of, I want to give them enough room to breathe and to talk to each other. I think of this as one long conversation, and we're lucky tonight to have a great conversation that we can have with some of our panelists, who I'm going to bring on now. They include Joanne Gabin, who is the professor of English at James Madison University and founder of the Furious Flower Poetry Center. Always good to see you. We also
good to see you.
We're also joined by Toy Derricott, who probably needs no introduction, but she's the author of 6 collections of poetry, most recently New and Selected Poems, and co-founded Cave Canem, the nation's premier home for Black poetry, an organization that I talk about at length, along with Furious Flower in the introduction. As you may have heard, we are sadly not being joined by Nikky Finney. She's not able to join us tonight because of the storms, and I think we're hoping that Patricia can make it on, but Patricia Spears Jones, who was supposed to join us, isn't right now. In any case, I want to kick off hearing some poetry and then maybe talking. And I know, Toy, you had picked a poem that's near and dear to my heart, Frederick Douglass, by Robert Hayden. Do you want to say a word about it before you read it to us, or should we hear it and then we talk about it?
Well, I just want to say it's so fascinating that the poems that were written, I'm going back to poems that were written not only by Robert Hayden, but I'm going back to County Cullen and even Frederick Douglass himself. And I just feel that now a kind of fruition of what these poets were saying is coming about through Black Lives Matter. This is the poem Frederick Douglass by Robert Hayden. When it is finally ours, this freedom, this liberty, this beautiful and terrible thing, needful to man as air, usable as earth, when it belongs at last to all, when it is truly instinct. Brain matter, diastole, systole, reflex action, when it is finally one, when it is more than the gaudy mumbo jumbo of politicians. This man, this Douglas, this former slave, this Negro beaten to his knees, exiled, visioning a world where none is lonely, none hunted, alien, this man, superb in love and logic, this man shall be remembered, oh, not with statues, rhetoric, and with legends and poems and wreaths of bronze alone, but with the lives grown out of his life, the lives fleshing his dream of the beautiful, needful thing.
How wonderful. Thank you.
What an amazing poem.
Yeah.
I know. Wow. And what an amazing reading of it.
And I'm thinking about how, you know, the whole thing about monuments and the monuments to the old, you know, Civil War heroes. And this is so important. And this man, Robert Hayden, is saying that the greatest monument is the lives grown out of his lives, the lives fleshing his dream of the beautiful, needful thing. And that just makes me think of the tradition among Black families in the Black culture to bring somebody along, and that we live through what happens to our children and with our children in the future, and how important that's been in what I was taught and what was taught to those before me.
Well, and I think those two sides, I mean, in a way, I hope struggle and song speak to the beauty and the needfulness, you know, those kind of dualities, this joined things that I think you see in the poetry throughout time. And I think it's lovely that Hayden conjures that in this one figure. He's always, I think, writing about figures, Robert Hayden. And, you know, when he goes back to Phyllis Wheatley, a poem that means a lot to me, when he really helps us understand the ways that Phyllis Wheatley was not just alone. We think of her and she's often depicted as this lone figure. And I think that the essay that names the introduction, this difficult miracle that June Jordan writes about, directly comes from this idea of Wheatley, and understanding Wheatley was one of the artists, you know, her portrait was painted likely by an artist, African artist. She wrote with and to Scipio Moorhead, another poet of the time who was Black. And so there is a community early on of people resisting, writing to each other and writing about each other. And Hayden sort of conjures that both historically, and then I love, as you put it, he projects us into the future.
Right. And I think that community for me is becoming more and more visible in some kind of way. I think through Black Lives Matter, I'm seeing the diaspora happening more publicly now. Things that felt in my childhood to be sort of, you know, our thing and sort of here and there, but not everywhere. But now I'm feeling pride and this sense of survival in a more public way.
Well, I wonder about that, and maybe you can talk about it. And if Joanne, who I don't see right now, is able to talk about Furious Flower in this regard, but also Cave Canem, because these are recent events, but also recent histories, recent organizations, but they're transformative already. And so I want to think about that with you all. You know, I was in a group called the Darkroom Collective, and we read at the first Furious Flower.
Yes.
I know we had something to do with Cave Canem. So could we talk for people who may not know or may need reminding, like, how do you see this recent history? And I guess thinking about, you know, Hayden's future, how are we living it out right now? Joanne?
Well, yes, Kevin, first of all, congratulations on the book. What a mammoth job you've done.
Thanks, it's big.
It's wonderful. Yes, it's great. It's a great cover. Well, you know, I've had the pleasure of sort of being a midwife to Black poetry over the last 25 years. And my mind goes back to you and the other members of the Darkroom Collective as you read that in that first conference. Sure. Something called a fisted reading. And I remember your reading, and I remember Major Jackson and sure. Thomas Sayers Ellis and Sharon Strange, Natasha Trethaway, and also Adissa Beatty. All of you read that afternoon, and it was phenomenal. And for me, it's one of those pleasures to see these babies, sure. Grow into such magnificent poets and academicians over these last 25 years. Look at you, director of the Schomburg, award-winning poet, and just a mover and shaker in terms of just writing about the poetry. So it's just wonderful to see all of you doing so well. But for Furious Flower, it started as a conference. It was not meant to be anything else. I worked so hard on that conference that I thought I would never do that again. And my dear friend Toy was there as well, and read so beautifully. There were more than 35 invited poets to that particular conference, and many other poets who just came to this, as Elizabeth Alexander said so beautifully at the 25th anniversary, to our kind of home. It was like church for us. And people gathered, and they gathered because they loved poetry and they loved being together to express their love for poetry. And so when all of this finished, we had more than 25 videotapes of these poets reading their poems and talking about poetics with other poets and critics. And that was significant because their faces and their words went all over the country, indeed all over the world. And people in France, people in Australia, people in Japan, people in China learned about Toy Derricotte and Sonia Sanchez and Nikki Giovanni and Hakeem Adabuti, and of course, Gwendolyn Brooks and Rita Dove. And it was magnificent that Gwendolyn Brooks was there. And I think it was because of Gwendolyn that everybody came. I couldn't have pulled all those people together. It was their love for the woman who broke the color line in terms of the Pulitzer Prize that they came for, but also this woman who loved poetry so much that she wanted to plant seeds in children, this love for poetry. So, well, it's history now, how it all happened. I had to wait another 5 years before I even thought about another Furious Flower. And I called my dear friend Sonia Sanchez and I said, do you think it's time for another conference? She said, baby, wait. She said, don't do it now, because this was so special that you have to wait a little longer so that people will miss it. And sure enough, I waited until 2004 to do the second one. And then after that second one, which was dedicated to Sonia Sanchez and Amir Baraka, it was decided at my university, James Madison University, that this conference was so significant and what we've done with it in terms of the products were so recognizable that the president at the time said, do you want a center? And I said, of course, yes. And so that's when the center was established in 2005. And then, of course, as you know, we had another conference in 2014, which was dedicated to the wonderful Rita Dove and her generation of poets. And so if fate will allow us, and another director might be there in 2024 to have that fourth Furious Flower conference. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to just walking in and being the queen of Furious Flower and saying, go for it, let's do this.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm really happy you mentioned Gwendolyn Brooks, because doing this anthology, you know, one of the things, if I didn't say already, one of the challenges was to have to limit it to one book. I mean, the tradition is so big now. There's nearly 250 poets in the anthology. The anthology is over 1,000 pages. And it includes, you know, I remember at one point, I think I had 50 some pages just of Miss Brooks, you know, and that to me was so important, very hard to choose between her terrific poems. But I think, you know, what's great is we have them, you know, and I think that's so important. A quick story about the first Furious Flower. I, you know, was a book collector, some would say, from the beginning when I was born. So I had all these first editions or little hardcover copies of Miss Brooks books. And I put some in my carry-on and I put some in my luggage, and they lost my luggage. And I remember just being like, oh no, I just wanted to have her sign them. And they arrived sort of, I think I got some signed, maybe they all arrived and I ran and got her, but she, you know, she was very generous about signing, and I still have a certain number, not as many as I wish, of her just saying, you know, congratulations, best of luck, and just really encouraging me as a young poet. Toy, I want you maybe to mention, just if you can tell briefly about Cave Canem, and then I want to hear some Miss Brooks and some other poets.
Well, just to say, it's really amazing to me how that seed just gets passed along. There's just something in us that needs poetry. And I know there was no poets around when I was growing up, but at the right time, somehow, I realized I was in the same city with Dudley Randall and Naomi Long Madgett. And so I went to a NYU for my graduate school, and I was the only African-American poet in my class, which was not new. And I just realized the need for a program, something where African-American poets could get together. And I tried to make that possible at NYU. It didn't work out. And I also tried to do something at Pitt. But it really wasn't until I met Cornelius Eady and his wife, Sarah Micklem, that it seemed that I needed a partner. It just didn't seem like it was happening when I was doing it all on my own. But when I asked them if they'd be interested in doing something like this, and I said, I can't get funding, I've tried. And Sarah said, well, let's just do it out of our own pockets. And those were the magic words. Because we didn't need to please anybody. We didn't need to work out any other kinds of situations with people. And I had a friend who was the director of a monastery on the Hudson River, and he had always said, just call me if you ever want to use the monastery. So we had a place for the first Cave Canem and the first 25 people. And I knew what it meant when those people got together on the first night. They were from all over the country. They had never met. Many of them had never seen another Black poet, never worked with another Black poet. And our teachers were Elizabeth Alexander, Afaa Weaver, who were teaching for free, by the way, and myself and Cornelius. So it was truly a love fest. And people had to write every day. And so began so much writing, which has gone on to be some of the most influential writing that's being done in the country right now.
Well, I wonder about that. And then I want to hear a poem because I was thinking a lot about this current Renaissance. You know, we've been through several Renaissances, I think, in Black poetry, and the anthology aims to capture that. The Harlem Renaissance, the Black arts movement. And this is just talking about the 20th century alone. And then there's this recent richness. And I think a lot of it has to do with some of the things we've heard. But, you know, I think some of the qualities I see are young people writing wildly in the best sense. They're able to write about what they wish. There isn't strictures on what they can say. So I think there's something exciting about that. I think we're about to hear from Patricia's about to join us.
Oh, good.
So I'm going to introduce her really quick, and then I want to read a poem from the anthology. So Patricia Spears Jones is a recipient of the Jackson Poetry Prize. Here she is. Good to see you. One of the welcome. And she won the Jackson Poetry Prize and the offer of 5 books of poetry. And it says here you're a culture maven, which we do believe and know.
Thank you.
So I was about to hear a poem, and then maybe we can hear a poem from you, Patricia.
Okay.
So it's interesting because one of the poets, we've been talking a little bit about Gwendolyn Brooks and Miss Brooks's strengths and power, I think, throughout this anthology. And, I think her inspiring generations after her, as Joanne said, she broke the color line in poetry. And I think, Patricia, one of the poets you wanted to read was Jane Cortez or Lorenzo Thomas. Could we hear The Jazz Fan Looks Back by Jane Cortez?
Okay, let me find it on my mobile.
Okay, I will.
It'll take a minute. It'll take a second, actually.
A minute.
And I apologize for being late, but things were a little insane.
We understand.
Kevin, I'd like to say, if I could, while she's finding that, Toy was talking about that seed that was planted and that wonderful organization that came out of it. But Toy reminded me that it was at Furious Flower, that first one in 1994, where she stayed up all night with young poets who were hungry to be together. And they didn't even go to sleep the first night. They were so excited. And maybe a week or so later, she called me and she said, there has to be an organization where these young writers can get together because they are hungry for togetherness. They're hungry for workshopping their work. So it's amazing that it has happened. And I was honored when she called me 2 years later to be on the board of Cave Canem. A lot has come out of it. So, Toy, congratulations. This is a good time for me, Kevin, to talk about.
Joanne, I found the poem.
Okay. This is a good time for me to say my book that came out just the beginning of 2020 called Furious Flower, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry. And so I'm talking here about the young voices, more than 100 of them that are out there now making it rich in terms of our field.
Great. Well, let's hear some Jane Cortez.
Okay. Well, let me just say why I chose Jane and also Lorenzo Thomas is because in the 70s, they were in different kinds of ways bringing something very different to the Black arts movement and to poetry, period. And this is a later Jane poem. Jazz Fan Looks Back. I crisscrossed with Monk, wailed with Bud, counted every star with Stitt, sang, don't blame me with Sarah wore a flower like Billy, screamed in the range of Dinah and scattered, how high the moon with Ella Fitzgerald, as she blew roof off the Shrine Auditorium. Jazz at the Philharmonic. I cut my hair into a permanent tam, made my feet rebellious, metronomes, embedded record needles and paint on paper, talked apology talk, laughed in high-pitched saxophone phrases, became keeper of every bird riff, every Lester lick, as Hawk melodicized my ear of infatuated tongues. And Blakey drummed militant messages in soul of my applauding teeth. And Ray hit bass notes to the last love seat in my bones. I moved in triple time with Max, grooved high with Diz, Filled with Pettiford, Wood home with Hamp, shuffled in Dexter's deck, squatty rooted with Peterson, dreamed a 52nd Street theme with Fats, and scattered Lady Be Good with Ella Fitzgerald as she blew off roof off the Shrine Auditorium, jazz at the Philharmonic.
I love that. I love that spirit you captured there in her writing and in her performance, and we do miss Jane Cortez. What else would you say about her and that musical? You mentioned something which I'd love to hear more about, what they brought differently to the Black arts movement and to these renaissances that we're, still enjoying and undergoing.
I think, well, they're very different things. I mean, Jane was clearly in the early 70s, the Black woman poet to deal with, especially in New York. Two things. One is because of her performance style, because she actually did have a band that she performed with. And so she was another musician in the band. And also because I think her and to a little lesser extent, Lorenzo, both were unapologetic Pan-Africanists. And so, but really Jane she was very connected to people on the continent, throughout the Caribbean. And so there was a real sense of being, she did start the Organization of Women Writers of Africa, because she really did have that kind of connection. And I think she brought a sense of the musicality, the rhythmic vernacular into her work in ways that she's basically, everybody else around her was trying to figure out how could we pick this up. Lorenzo, I always think of as one of his great poems is Thinking in Words. And so to me, he is the great thinker in African-American poetry. He's using all of the same devices as all the other guys, Baraka and blah, 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 but in a very different way. Part of it, I think, is because he was Panamanian American, and also, and so he was he kind of had this larger vision. He was very much involved with the sort of beat poetry people, not like Ted Jones or something, but really in a very deep way. But all the Umbra people, him, David Henderson, all of them, were really kind of bringing something different to the table.
I love that. And I think that poem embraces the song side of the anthology. Not that there's one side or that struggle and song aren't constantly interfacing. I thought maybe we're going to hear some more Gwendolyn Brooks later, but I thought I'd hear a poem that thinks a little bit about the struggle part. And this is a short poem by Gwendolyn Brooks after her wonderful, important poem, whose title alone is, I think, one of the miracles of the poetry. A Bronzeville mother loiters in Mississippi, period. Meanwhile, a Mississippi mother burns bacon, which is this beautiful longer poem. And I think one of the things you see in both Cortez and the Hayden we just saw is they almost condense all of jazz history or history in one poem. They're kind of mini epics, which I think is something you see. And while we can't hear all of the first part of Gwendolyn Brooks's poem, I think of this second poem, the little part I'm going to read, as kind of an extension of the Mississippi mother poem. And it's the last quatrain of the Ballad of Emmett Till. After the murder, after the burial. Emmett's mother is a pretty face thing, the tint of pulled taffy. She sits in a red room drinking black coffee. She kisses her killed boy, and she is sorry. Chaos in windy grays through a red prairie. And that poem to me always struck me as just, I mean, you know, it struck me, but it also struck me as a poem that is another take, because the beautiful thing and powerful thing in the other poem, the Mississippi Mother poem, is she's able somehow to have us in the mind of one of the white women who's married to one of the killers of Emmett Till. And if I had to pick a topic that runs throughout, certainly since the last few generations of poetry, it's Emmett Till. I almost had to, you know, limit the number of Emmett Till poems, because poets have responded so powerfully to his loss, his mother's championing of his life. And in this current moment, it has a double meaning, I think. The anthology was done before this summer, but it still is speaking to that. I think I finished the introduction on Juneteenth this year, you know, and here I was thinking, you know, Juneteenth, as you may remember, that was like a day of celebration. We have some barbecue and some, you know, other good food. And then suddenly we're like having to think about all this history and history denied, let's say. And I think that those Emmett Till poems, Brooks, the finest among them, speak to that. And I wonder how we wrestle with these two ideas that are proposed, at least in the title, struggle and song. How do we think of them in the next few minutes that we have left together?
Well, I think it is so readily apparent in just the oxymoron, furious flower, the beauty of a song, the beauty of a flower, as just opposed to this furiousness. And she really understood rage. And she knew how to put it subtly into her poems. You know, I was moved when you read that poem, because the one thing that I can remember that really changed me forever was the photograph of the Emmett Till in Jet magazine. And it really changed my trajectory in terms of how I was going to look at the world. And so much of what I've done has been because I see literature as a way of activism.
Right.
And I owe that to Emmett Till and all of those people who struggled, all of those children who struggled during the civil rights movement.
Yeah. Boy, no, go ahead, Patricia.
Well, it certainly can't be read here, but one of the poems that I had sent to you was The Bathers by Lorenzo Thomas. And thinking about struggle and song, one of the things about that poem is it's about the Birmingham Children's Campaign. And it's about what those children faced. But he also connects it, because I didn't get a chance to hear the rest of you guys, I'm so sorry about that, was also just spirituality into a real deep connection. Again, thinking about the African section of this, or the African ideas of this, is that one of the things that him, Ishmael Reed, and others were very deeply connected to was Egypt and Egyptology, and the idea of what does it mean to be transformed, you know, in a non-Christian way. And so I would say that that one of the things that African American poets and literature has brought is something that goes outside of the spiritual ways in which we deal with things, and it can carry both the struggle and the song.
Well, I love that. I mean, the song often. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I heard you reading the poem, the lines where you describe her in the room, and the vowel sounds, the long sounds, the elongated sounds, hold so much feeling. It's not just a description. She's holding the feeling of the grief of that moment. And it made me think of how in my parents' generations, we weren't supposed to feel those feelings. They were very, committed to moving on, to not talking about their feelings too much. They were very aware of what was happening, Emmett Till, but we didn't stop to grieve over it. And so I think it takes a great poet to be in touch with those actual feelings of what it's like to go through these moments in time. And I think now those feelings are coming back to us. I feel it very much in the work that the young Black poets are writing today, the grief for the past.
Well, I think there's a sense of history in the poetry I see. Often, Emmett Till is a perfect example of a touchstone for contemporary poets. But also, I think in the years, past 50 years, I think poets have often engaged history as a topic, cultural memory. And Patricia, thank you for pointing out the African part of the African-American part of the title. And I really wanted that kind of sense of these are the things, African-American poetry, and what does it asks us, what's it mean to be African-American? What's it mean to be American? What is American about it? What's African-American about it? And all those questions, I think, are answered in different ways by different poets, but almost by line to line, poem to poem, poet to poet. They answer them and address them and think of them in different ways. I want to end our conversation thinking about something that I also mentioned in the introduction. And Toy, you're saying about joy as an act of resistance, which I think is such an important notion, and goes with struggle, goes with song. Would you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, people may not know even that you're the author of that idea that I think is so important, that joy is an act of resistance.
Well, I just think it's so fascinating that that we see in these gatherings. I mean, ever since Congo Square, we're in New Orleans, where all the Black people who didn't necessarily speak the same language would come together. But you see that joy in the gatherings and in the music and in that which comes forth from our spiritual founding. I think it's a very special kind of joy that we're experiencing. And certainly at Furious Flower, as Joanne said, that night I was with those young kids. And it's about survival, and it's the joy that we, I sometimes think it's like, you meet with the family that you were disconnected with 500 years ago, suddenly there they are. It's that kind of triumph. And I don't think you get there by sort of ignoring the difficulties. It doesn't mean joy like, oh, I'm so happy today. Life is so nice.
Right.
It means that you're very aware of the work you're doing and how hard it is.
Sure. And
yet you're doing it with a very full and generous heart. And so it's a day-to-day act of connection and feeling that joy in our whole group. I mean, now it's just so rich and so everywhere. And that's the joy I think you can feel even in the most difficult times. It's still there.
Well, I think poetry captures that. I want to read one last poem by Lucille Clifton that I think speaks to this idea But do Joanne and Patricia, do you have one last thing to say? I mean, we only have a minute or two left, so I don't.
Well, Kevin, I just want to read a couple of lines from Gwendolyn Brooks's poem, the Sermon on the Warped Land, and I'll just read 3 lines. And went about the warped land, saying, no, my people black and black, revile the river, say the river turns, and turn the river.
Nice.
Thank you for having us here.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to see you, Kevin.
Likewise. Patricia, do you have any last things before we hear from
I just think that as an Arkansas-born person, I think that we ought to realize that we are the creators of the blues, and that part of what Toya was talking about is what blues did. It allowed people to deal with struggle and create song. And some of those songs were happy ones. And so we need to remember that and use it as much as we can. It's the basis of where we are in many kinds of ways. And also it's okay to be a little different. That's okay. That's what I mean.
Well, let's hear from Lucille Clifton, because she, to me, she would always sign her books Joy. And I think it speaks to, as Toy was mentioning, not an easy contentment, but a hard-won struggle, a blues tone. And this poem, I think, really embodies that. It's usually referred to by its first lines, won't you celebrate with me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay. My one hand holding tight my other hand. Come, celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Amen.
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 Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin, for bringing her into this space.
Yes. She's always with us. It's great to have her.
There.
So I want
to
thank you. We still have more for you all out there. So next we're gonna hear from Sonia Sanchez, the wonderful, terrific poet, who I really think needs no introduction. And then we're also going to hear from Danez Smith, who is the award-winning author of Homie and Don't Call Us Dead, both terrific books. And then we're going to hear a little bit of a special treat, and then I'll be back to talk with Jericho Brown and have a little more conversation about his work and the anthology.
I'm reading a poem by a very important poet by the name of Audre Lorde. For the record, in memory of Eleanor Bumpers, call out the colored girls and the ones who call themselves Black and the ones who hate the word nigger and the ones who are very pale, who will count the big, fleshy women, the grandmother weighing 22 stone with the rusty braids and a gap-toothed skull, who wasn't afraid of Armageddon. The first shotgun blast tore her right arm off, the one with the butcher knife. The second blew out her heart through the back of her chest. And I'm going to keep writing it down, how they carried her body out of the house, dress torn up around her waist, uncovered, past tenants and the neighborhood children, a mountain of Black woman. And I am going to keep telling this if it kills me, and it might, in ways I am learning. The next day, Indira Gandhi was shot down in her garden, and I wonder what these two 67-year-old colored girls are saying to each other now. planning their return, and they weren't even sisters. That is an amazing poem. And we understand what was happening a long time ago in the 60s, the 70s, and 80s, and still happening today. And the other poem I'd like to read is by Alice Walker, another fine poet, poets who carried on the tradition of what I call great Black American poetry. This poem is simply called Women. They were women then, my mama's generation, husky of voice, stout of step, with fists as well as hands, how they battered down doors and ironed starched white shirts, how they led armies, head rag generals across minefields, booby trap ditches to discover books, desks, a place for us, how they knew what we must know without knowing it, page of it themselves. And, you know, these poems just make me truly understand just how important these women poets were. And they wrote about things that people are writing about today still. The amazing beauty, talent, the amazing grasp that women have had in this thing called poetry, and the beauty of it. One other poem, I guess I can read. I had it here, but it just goes to show how you lose things at some particular point. A poem by Audrey, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. I have not ever seen my father's grave, not that his judgment eyes have been forgotten, nor his great hands print on our evening doorknobs, one half turned each night, and he would come, grapple with the world's business, massive and silent, as the whole day's wish, ready to redefine each of our shapes. But now the evening doorknobs wait and do not recognize us as we pass. Each week, a different woman, regular as his one quick glass, each evening pulls up the grass, his stillness grows, calling it weed. Each week a different woman has my mother's face, and he who time has changeless must be amazed, who knew and loved but one. My father died in silence, loving creation and well-defined response. He lived still judgments on familiar things and died knowing a January 15th that year, me, lest I go into dust. I have not ever seen my father's grave. Audre Lorde. And maybe, I don't know what I will read next, but I'll just say, when I was in a place called China, before Selma, you were born, in 1973, I called home to say hello to my children, to my Aunt Sarah. And I said to them, it's Monday. I'm in a place called, at that time, Peking, and we're going to climb the Great Wall of China. And the children said at that time, Aunt Sarah, Mommy thinks that it's Monday, but it's really Sunday, isn't it? It was very difficult to explain that to them through all that distance in Beijing and a place called New York City and Riverside Drive. And so on the way to climb the Great Wall of China, I simply wrote a haiku to Mungu and Marani from Beijing. Let me wear the day well, so when it reaches you, you will enjoy it. And later on, I read that haiku when I ended a reading at the University of Beijing. I read that haiku that said simply that, and one of the officials stood up and said, Professor Sanchez, if we here in the East learn how to wear our days well, perhaps by the time you get that same day in the West, we will have peace. Let us hope that is really going to be true one day, that indeed we will have peace. So thank you so much for the invite to come and see all these amazing poets poeting and coming to tell us simply at some particular point that we are beautiful people poeting on this planet.
Hey, everybody. My name is Danez Smith. Thank you for that, Professor Sanchez. Yeah, how do you follow up Sonia Sanchez reading reading Audre Lorde? You don't. I'm going to go to this bed behind me after this and take a nap because I'm a little overwhelmed. I'm going to start off tonight reading a poem by Melvin Dixon, who is a beloved poet hero of mine. Who, like Essex Hemphill and Asoto Saint and a lot of other great Black queer ancestors that we have in this genre were taken from us by the HIV epidemic. And this poem of Melvin's really helped me a lot when I went through my own when I went through my own diagnosis. And this is a poem that even when that process gets hard for me, that I still reach towards. Heartbeats. Workout, 10 laps, chin ups, look good. Steam room, dress warm, call home, fresh air. Eat right, rest well, sweetheart, safe sex, sore throat, long flu, hard nodes. Beware. Test blood, count cells, reds thin, white slow. Dress warm, eat well, short breath, fatigue, night sweats, dry coughs, loose stools, weight loss. Get mad, fight back, call home, rest well. Don't cry, take charge, no sex, eat right, call home, talk slow, chin up, no air, arms wide, no it's hard, cough dry, hold on, mouth wide, drink this, breathe in, breathe out. No air, breathe in, no air, blackout, white rooms, head hot, feet cold, no work, eat right, CAT scan, chin up, breathe in, breathe out, no air, thin blood, sore lungs, mouth dry, mind gone. 6 months, 3 weeks, can't eat, no air. Today, tonight, it waits for me, sweetheart, don't stop. Breathe in, breathe out. Ooh, thank you, Melvin. I'm so thankful for like all the framing of anthologies tonight and just thinking about why we return to those archives to recognize that we come from a long history of folks, right, that have figured it out before in their own context, right, and made it through wrote the hard and the good. I'm really proud tonight to be a Black poet. All right, last one. I'm gonna read one of my own poems. I hope that's not tacky tonight. I think I'm the first person to do that tonight. I would. This is called My President. It's about everybody but Trump. Please, for the life of you, don't vote for him, vote for Joe Biden. Professor Sonia was talking about peace, which I believe is a long vision. And while I don't believe that Joe Biden is some savior, I think that he is the right step in the long vision of peace and stability in this country. Even if it's a misstep, it's the misstep that we need to take. We can't afford 4 more years of Trump. Please get out there. All right, my president. Today, I elect Jonathan, 11 and already making roads out of water. Young genius, blog writer, little community activist, curls tight as pinky swears, Black as my nation. I trust the world in his tender, blooming hands. I trust him to tell us which rivers are safe to drink and which hold fish like a promise. And I elect Eve Ewing, who I know would misfrizzle the country into one big classroom where the grandmas finger paint the national budget and uncles stand around smoking blacks, plotting on stars for our escape. She could walk to the podium at her inauguration and say, the future is now. And we would all marvel at the sun and moon looping the sky like a GIF. It's pronounced GIF, as the cars all learned to fly and our skin grew bulletproof. And Colin Kaepernick is my president, who kneels on the air, bent toward a branch, throwing apples down to the children and vets. And Rihanna is my president, walking out of global summits with a wine glass still in hand, our taxes returned in gold to dust our faces into coins. And my mama is my president, her grace stunts on amazing brown hands, breaking brown bread over mouths of the sick until there are none unfed. And my grandma is my president, and her cabinet is her cabinet, because she knows to trust what the pan knows, how the skillet wins the war. And the man I saw high kicking his way down the river, he is my president. And the trans girl making songs in her closet, spinning the dark into a booming dress, she is my president. And Shonda Rhimes is my president, and Nate Marshall is my president, and Trina is my president, and the boys outside Walgreens selling candy for a possibly fictional basketball team, they are my presidents. And the bus driver who stops after you yell wait only twice is my prez. And dude at the pizza spot who will give you a free slice if you're down to wait for him to finish the day's fourth prayer, he is my president. And my auntie, only a few months clean, but clean, she is my president. And my neighbor who holds the door open when my arms are full of laundry is my president. And every head nod is my president. And every child singing summer with a red sweet tongue is my president. And the birds and the cooks and the single moms especially, and the weed dealers and the teachers and the meter maid who lets you slide, and the cab drivers who stop, and the nurses' swollen feet, and the braiders' exhausted hands, and the bartender and Beyonce and all her kids, and the rabbi and the sad girls and the leather daddy who always stops to say good morning, and the boy crying on the train, and the sudden abuela who rubs his back, and the uncle who offers him water, and the drag queen who begins to hum, oh, my presidents, my presidents, my presidents, my presidents, show me to our nation. My only border is my body. I sing your names, your names, my mighty anthem. Thank you.
One, this is the urgency. Live, and have your blooming in the noise of the whirlwind. 2, salvage in the spin, endorse the splendor splashes, stylize the flawed utility, prop a malign or failing light, but know the whirlwind is our commonwealth. Not the easy man who rides above them all, not the jumbo brigand, not the pet bird of poets, that sweetest sonnet shall straddle the whirlwind, nevertheless live. 3, all about are the cold places. All about are the pushmen and jeopardy, theft. All about are the stormers and scramblers, but what must our season be which starts from fear? Live and go out. Define and medicate the whirlwind. 4, the time cracks into furious flower, lifts its face all unashamed and sways in wicked grace. Whose half-black hands assemble oranges, is tom-tom-hearted, goes in bearing oranges and boom. And there are bells for orphans, and red and shriek and sheen. Our garbage man is dignified as any diplomat. Big Bessie's feet hurt like nobody's business, but she stands, bigly, under the unruly scrutiny, stands in the wild weed. In the wild weed, she is a citizen, and is a moment of highest quality, admirable. It is lonesome, yes, for we are the last of the loud. Nevertheless, live. Conduct your blooming in the noise and whip of the whirlwind. So this is a great poem. And this is a poem that I have lived with and live with very much in my day-to-day. When my sons were growing up, I would exhort them in appropriate moments, conduct your blooming in the noise and whip of the whirlwind. That didn't have a political context. That was always about the things that swirl around us and how you hold yourself together and how you express yourself and how you be yourself when the world around you is challenging you. I think that also to students, I've taught this poem 10 million times, over the years, and to say to classrooms of college students, what does it mean to conduct your blooming in the noise and whip of the whirlwind? What does it mean to come into voice? What does it mean to think about your activism? What does that look like? What are all of the ways that that can look like? I think that thinking about the whirlwind as a perennial state, the political moment in which this was written was different from the political moment that we're in now, but certainly as challenging in the moment to the people who were in it. I think that also what I love so much about Brooks, the peculiarities of her syntax, of her word choices, of her inventions. I don't think anyone's ever written bigly. She stands bigly, but even when you see what it does when you read it, it makes you plant yourself like Big Bessie, thinking about what it means to say, I am here. The wind will blow me, but I am here. My feet hurt. I've been working, but I am here. So when I read Brooks and when I read her out loud, I think I can only aspire to this. Yeah.
You've heard some stunning poetry tonight, and we will continue in that vein. It is my honor to introduce you to my friend, Jericho Brown. He is the recipient of so many awards. I'll just say a few. Fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University, and the National Endowment for the Arts. His first book, Please, won the American Book Award. His second book, The New Testament, won the Anisfield Wolf Book Award. And his third book, The Tradition won the 2020 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. He is an associate professor of English and creative writing and director of the creative writing program at Emory. But on a personal note, I love this man. I love him because he is an encourager of the work that we do at Furious Flower. He has participated in every important event that we've had at Furious Flower for more than a decade. And he has been the kind of friend who holds me up even when I'm feeling low. I know this man because he has a huge heart. I understand Jericho Brown because I too grew up in the Black church with its penchant for pageantry. I too have Southern roots, and I know that those roots grow deep in the soil of myth and folklore. I understand Jericho because I see the beauty of life in flowers, as he does. I see them as signs of eternity. I know that he believes in a community standing in the need of prayer, but he remains hopeful. I understand the rage he feels. I understand his anger and the urgency of now that he puts in his poetry. I see him because he is in the tradition of love. And Jericho, love illuminates you. It is an honor for me to be here to help you celebrate your latest achievement in the life of your writing, the Pulitzer. Why don't we just start there? How does it feel? What special meaning do you bring to joining your fellow poets? Gwendolyn Brooks, Rita Dove, Yusef Kamanyaka, Gregory Pardlow, Natasha Trethewey, Tyehimba Jess. I mean, what a array of amazing poets. But I'm sure, you know, after the jubilation, you thought about this as a real moment in your life as a writer.
You know, there's so much work we do, and Joanne, you probably know this better than a lot of people who can say it. I know you know this. There's a lot of work that we do that will never be known and never be recognized. And I understood when I decided to commit my life to poetry, I understood that I was committing my life to something that might not include recognition. So when we do get some recognition, we are particularly excited because we know that it has to last us until the next piece of recognition comes along. But we don't do what we do for recognition. If we did, we wouldn't have the jobs we have. There's some other reason why we do what we do. So of course I was really glad to get the Pulitzer Prize. And you know, I don't ever mind attention. I like attention. And I really, the dream for any poet is to have their name somewhere near Gwendolyn Brooks's name in public. And I'm really happy to have my name near hers and near Tracy K. Smith's name, my good friend, you know. So there's a way that I feel like I wrote a book called The Tradition because I was writing in the tradition of many of those poets, those Black poets who have won that prize in particular. And I was also writing away from that tradition to make sure that all of Jericho Brown could be included and change what that tradition looks like. And so I'm really happy to have that recognition. And I'm particularly glad to be here with you today, even though talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, back in November of 2018, when you were finishing up this book, The Tradition, you sent me an email and you said, you see, I keep my emails, Jericho. You said, you know, I want to come back to JMU and read. And I think this is the best thing that I have done. This is one of the best books that I've done. In fact, you said it was the best one. And you were prescient at that point. And I just want to know, I want to ask the question, how do you know when a poem or group of poems is good?
You don't know. I think that's part of what community is about. You have to be kind enough to people, and you have to allow those people to be kind to you. A part of where this started, this conversation of the day really started in a conversation about community. What is Cave Canem? It's a community. What is Furious Flower? It's a community. It's a way that we meet and come in contact with one another and hopefully love on one another. And we create these spaces, and we have to be responsible not to somehow take advantage of these spaces, because they are precious to us. It's not like we have so many. Even now, people pretend there's so many, but there aren't a lot of places for us. And so because I have that, I have friends. You know, when my first Cave Canem, I went to Cave Canem with Douglas Kearney, one of the greatest poets in the country right now. You know, I was in Group A with Dawn Lundy Martin. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, one of my teachers was a woman named Rita Gavazarani, and when she taught my class, she taught the class. Her last class that she ever taught was my class at Callaloo, and I was in a class with Tyehimba Jess. So for me, it has always been the opportunity to hold on to not just what I have, but who I have, and let who I have hold on to me. And if you do that, sooner or later, somebody's going to send you a poem and say, what do you think? And you have to be honest enough to say, I think you need to work on this some more. Or you have to be honest enough to say, I ain't doing nothing over here, but you writing. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm just grateful for my friends, because they kind of tell me when to leave it alone, when to put it down, you know.
That's terrific. That's terrific, because we do this in community. We assess ourselves because of who we are around. I think it's a good time to read a poem from In the Tradition.
I'll read a poem in the tradition for you. You wanted to hear the tradition, so I'll start with that.
Okay, thank you.
The title poem. The tradition. Aster, nasturtium, delphinium. We thought fingers in dirt meant it was our dirt. Learning names in heat, in elements classical philosophers said could change us. Stargazer, foxglove. Summer seemed to bloom against the will of the sun, which news reports claimed flamed hotter on this planet than when our dead fathers wiped sweat from their necks. Cosmos, baby's breath. Men like me and my brothers filmed what we planted for proof we existed before too late. Sped the video to see blossoms brought in seconds, colors you expect in poems where the world ends, everything cut down. John Crawford, Eric Garner, Mike Brown.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. You know, I'm an art lover, and I was really blown away by the cover of the tradition. And let me give some credit to the cover art by L. Rafi Burgess called You're in the Middle of the World. How does this image carry the sustaining metaphors in that collection?
Well, for one thing, I think what we know is that this is a Black boy in this image. If you look closely enough, you might even think he's a beard. There's a beard there. So you wonder, is this a Black boy or is this a Black man? And he is surrounded by nature, by the natural world, by the environment. And he's clearly enjoying it because he's made a garland. He's made a garland of it to put around his head, you know. He's playing, he's at play. And in the picture, you can only see one of his eyes. And I feel like he looks, when you look at that eye, you know, because there are flowers covering the other eye. But when you look at that eye, I feel like he looks like he's been caught playing, you know? And that's what I feel like when I'm writing my poems. I feel like I'm enjoying my natural self and I feel like I'm playing. I know I'm doing a good job if I can make it feel like play. And so this was really interesting to me, this image in particular, because obviously it speaks to the poem I just read. Yes. And it speaks to a long tradition of Black people in this country, people who really work the land and care about the land. You know, my grandparents were sharecroppers, and it's easy to think about Black people cutting your grass, right? Or easy to think about Black people weeding your flower bed. But we have to remember that Black people have their own grass and their own flower beds.
That's right.
And one of the things that was so important to my dad is that I understood that one day I would grow up and have a yard and take care of my yard, and that would be my contribution to the street on which I lived, to the neighborhood where I lived. And so that's an interesting part of the tradition that I think we don't get to talk about enough. And it's an interesting way to think about ourselves. You know, we, like any other human people, we are in love with beauty.
That's right.
Beauty. And I love how this young person on this image is taken with the beauty.
It's just stunning.
Yeah.
And you reminded me of my mother, who came from North Carolina, who had fields to plant, but she came to Baltimore and she had a backyard that was a 4x4, but she planted cabbage and beans and tomatoes. And she used that little plot of ground to just grow some beautiful vegetables and flowers too. And it never leaves you that love for nature, that love of putting your hands in the soil. Yes, yes, indeed. You know, you've read that poem several places, but I'd love to hear For Day in the Morning.
Yeah, I'll read that, sure. From 14. For Day in the Morning. My mother grew morning glories that spilled onto the walkway toward her porch because she was a woman with land who showed as much by giving it color. She told me I could have whatever I worked for. That means she was an American. But she'd say it was because she believed in God. I am ashamed of America and confounded by God. I thank God for my citizenship in spite of the timer set on my life to write these words. I love my mother. I love Black women who plant flowers as sheepish as their sons. By the time the blooms unfurl themselves for a few hours of light, the women who tend them are already at work. Blue, I'll never know who started the lie that we are lazy. But I'd love to wake that bastard up at 4 in the morning, toss him in a truck and drive him under God past every bus stop in America to see all those Black folk waiting to go work for whatever they want. A house, a boy to keep the lawn cut, some color in the yard. My God, we leave things green.
Oh gosh, I love that poem.
Thank you.
I love that poem. Thank you.
An interesting poem to think about in the midst of this pandemic and with all the talk about essential workers and that which is and is not essential. We find that Black people are central to and essential to American life any way you look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going through what is a triple threat here. The coronavirus, you know, this economic downturn for poor people. We've always been poor, we're just getting poorer. And of course, the violence at the hands of the police and white supremacists. We are suffering as a people. What do you see as your role as a poet in these uncertain times, these times of fear and frustration?
Yeah, well, I think every poet has only one role, and that is to tell the truth. And it's a good thing we each get to see different things in a lifetime, so we all get to tell all of the truth, you know?
That's right.
And so I get to tell the part of the truth that I know to be true. And I get to tell it as best as I possibly can, as directly as I possibly can through my poems. And that's what I'm thinking about when I'm writing my poems. I'm thinking about how to tell the truth. And this is one of the reasons why I thank God that I'm Black every day. And I really do thank God. I realized a couple of years ago, you know, sometimes you think back on your life and you reimagine a situation, or you say, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done this that way. And you know what I'm so glad about, and I know this is not the case for a lot of people who came before me, but in no reimagining of my life have I ever wanted to be anything but Black. Every time I look back at it, No matter how bad I messed that situation up, I was glad to be Black while I was doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so because I'm Black, because I'm queer, because I'm from the South, because of all that I bring, I get to bring a new and particular truth to the tapestry of truths that Black poets will bring together. I'm so excited to hear so many people read other folks' poems. And I was thinking about this poem by Bob Kaufman, where he at the end of the poem, Bob Kaufman says that sound is Bob Kaufman.
Yes. And drop the mic.
Part of that tapestry of sound, you know. Yeah. And that's what I want to do. I want to tell the truth, and I want to be a part of that tradition. I want my name linked up with Gwendolyn Brooks and with Bob Kaufman and with Langston Hughes and with Lucille Clifton, as well as so many present day poets who I love, like Lillian Bertram and Honoré Fannin Jeffers, who are on the long list for the National Book Award today.
Yes.
There's another Black poet on that long list, and his name, Tommy Blount. Oh, wonderful book. I love, he has these beautiful poems about Luther Vandross in that book. You know, so we're all of our work is important work. Right. And when I talk about community, there are 3 levels of community when you're talking about being a poet. There is those who came before you, who leave themselves to you in their books.
That's right.
So, you know, it's real. When I say I'm walking around with Gwendolyn Brooks and I'm reciting some Gwendolyn Brooks to myself, that's real. And that's what she meant for me to do.
Yes.
The present tense, you know. I looked at that edge up on Danez and I got jealous. And then there's the future, and anybody who's writing is writing, thinking about the future.
The future.
Something will be here when we are gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said earlier, and I will pause for the cause and say that we have gathered more than 100 of the future poets in this book, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry. And I'm very proud to have edited this book with Lauren Aline. So I had to plug this book because it's really important that we honor our own. And that's been the really wonderful thing about the whole Furious Flower movement. Before the Pulitzer knew you, we knew you. And we honored you by having you read every time we could get you to read, because we knew, you know, just how talented, just how brilliant you are. I wanted to also talk about language. You are such an experimental and innovative poet. And, you know, I was thinking about Eugene Redmond and his creation of the Kwansaba.
Yeah.
And my dear friend Sonia Sanchez and her creation of the Sanku. And Tyehimba Jess and his creation of these concrete collage poems blew my mind in oleo. And of course, Terrence Hayes with the creation of the Golden Shovel. Now you have your own form, the duplex, and you have to tell us how this came about and tell us what it is. And then you have to read a duplex.
I'll read a duplex. I created a form. I invented a form called the duplex because I wanted you to have somewhere to stay. I really, you know, there's all this, when you're a poet, you have a certain kind of, when you're a poet in the English language, you have a certain kind of a relationship, whether you like it or not, you're in relationship to the sonnet. And if you're a Black poet, you're always mad about it. So, because you know the English language has not been good to all of us. Right. No matter how well you speak it, you know the history of it. That, you know, it's the sonnet turns out to be the imperialist form, right? It's this thing we're sort of working toward achieving. And that the outside, people who don't even know, who haven't read a poem, they'll know that a sonnet is a poem. And yet we want to find our way out of that because we're always trying to break hold from that imperialism. You know, they don't call it the Elizabethan sonnet for nothing, right?
Yeah, right.
So I'll read you these poems are sonnets, but they're also blues poems, and they're also huzzles. And I took elements from all three forms and put them together because I wanted to make something that was like me. I wanted to make something that was a single vessel but carried several identities and carried them whole. So I'll read you one of the duplexes. Duplex. I begin with love, hoping to end there. I don't want to leave a messy corpse. I don't want to leave a messy corpse full of medicines that turn in the sun. Some of my medicines turn in the sun. Some of us don't need hell to be good. Those who need most need hell to be good. What are the symptoms of your sickness? Here is one symptom of my sickness. Men who love me are men who miss me. Men who leave me are men who miss me in the dream where I am an island. In the dream where I am an island, I grow green with hope. I'd like to end there. That's a duplex.
Wonderful. You're in the grand tradition of Sterling Brown and the blues ballad. You know, I'm telling you, all of this comes together. And this is the one thing I've loved so much about being a kind of midwife for Furious Flower, because I've seen these amazing connections and how we mirror one another through the generations. Mm-hmm. And as you're youngster as far as I'm concerned, but now these younger poets are looking up to you because you have achieved so much.
And I agree with you there,
before you
Joanne.
read the last poem, for you to say something about what you're doing in the future. Are you going to work on the novel or another book of poetry?
A novel would be nice. Another book of poetry would be nice. I think we're getting, I think they got the cane at the Apollo. You know, the Schomburg is in New York. They keep that.
Okay, we're off. Are we off?
Yeah, so I think.
No, you are still here. I was going to let Jericho go ahead and wrap up that last bit that you had to say. But thank you for seeing that, Jericho. We are here with a long evening, and we have a few more poets we want to get to before people put themselves to bed. But let me just say, while you're here, thank you all for this very rich conversation, and congratulations, Jericho. I have actually never met you in person, but I'm glad to be able to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gavin.
Thank you. Thank you, Jericho. Bye-bye now.
Bye now. Thank you, Dr. Gavin. Again, thank you, Jericho Brown, for that very informative conversation. It's exciting when you get a chance to hear from the most recent Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, is a Black poet. One of the things that now it has disappeared on me, but a quote from Amani Perry. She says, "Sin and shame are found in neither my body nor my identity. Blackness is an immense and a defiant joy." And that just resonated so much with me while Jericho was basically giving us a sermon while also answering a question. So thank you. All of the poets that you have heard thus far are all featured in this anthology. It is why we are here celebrating both the 250 years of African-American poetic traditions, but also it is also the release of this new book, this anthology. And if you can only imagine, I'm sure that there are 250 more poets that could have gone in here. But hopefully, if you have not already considered getting the book, that you will do so now. There are poets that were here on the screen. There are poets whose names were checked as part of the conversation, who are located in here. And then, as I said earlier, there are other poets that I hope you will explore and get to know more. Next Monday begins our week-long Schomburg Center Literary Festival. And if you have enjoyed tonight's poetry, I want you to know that there is more. We are exploring the works of Sterling Brown, as well as Audre Lorde. And you can simply go to our website at schomburgcenterlitfest.org. Our last four poets for the evening have distinctive styles and voices. They include another Pulitzer Prize winner and Tyehimba Jess. They include poets like Afaa Michael Weaver and Jessica Care Moore in the spirit of the Black arts movement. And they include our next poet, Daylana R.A. Dameron, who is the author of a collection called Weary Kingdom. If you love Lucille Clifton, I think Delana Dameron is in the same vein as that. So please welcome Delana to our virtual stage.
Good evening, y'all. I am so honored to share some poetry with you tonight and to continue the celebration of African American poetry. In 2006, I was a fellow at the 10th Kaveh Summer Poetry Workshop and Retreat. Ms. Lucille Clifton was a visiting faculty member. During her morning workshop, she shared with us stories about her lifetime of writing and poetry and what it meant to be a Black woman storyteller. I'd like to share two things she said that continue to shape my own work as a storyteller and poet. She said, "Some of you are blessed or cursed to see beyond yourselves." And later in the workshop, she said, "I try to write with everything that I am." Ms. Lucille is most certainly a poet of our past, of our present, and I believe of our forever futures. And I want to share two short poems of hers. This is 1994. I was leaving my 58th year when a thumb of ice stamped itself near my heart. You have your own story. You know about the fears, the tears, the scarred disbelief. You know the saddest lies are the ones we tell ourselves. You know how dangerous it is to be born with breasts. You know how dangerous it is to wear dark skin. I was leaving my 58th year when I woke in the winter of a cold and mortal body, thin icicles hanging off the one mad nipple weeping. Have we not been good children? Did we not inherit the earth? But you must know all about this from your own shivering life. And then this is what I think when I ride the train. Maybe my father made these couplers. His hands were hard and black and swollen, the knuckles like lugs or bolts in a rich man's box. He broke a bone each year as if on schedule. When I read about a wreck, how the cars buckle together or hang from the track in a chain, never separate, I think, see, there was my father. He was a chipper. He made the best damn couplers in the whole white world. I think about these poems a lot, especially this week. This past Monday, September 14th, marked 2 years since my father's passing. In grief and trying to grasp and understand, I was invited to write a poem celebrating Miss Lucille's work for an anthology produced by 92nd Y. And I was still writing with, as she says, with everything that I was, which is to say, grieving my father, trying to see beyond myself. Here's the poem, titled 2018, or What I Think When I Watch the Rain, with an epigraph. Have we not been good children? Did we not inherit the earth? Lucille Clifton. And then it was understood Daddy would leave me. Everyone one day will have this story. I know grief in our deep dive into it. The waves, the tidal waves boil up without sirens. How he let me leave Columbia last without a goodbye, our first estrangement. Then he left me, his cold and mortal body in the hospital room. I opened the windows, let the spirit out. The rains and winds sweep in. You know how dangerous it is to be Black in this world without a moral compass. Daddy is gone. I know how dangerous it is to be Black in this world and not give a fuck. I lift his shotgun, hold its cold weight, consider the trigger, small linchpin of power, choose to live, choose to let live. The day we honored him, his body was elsewhere waiting a fire, outside a blinding rain. Not the devil beating his wife, not wedded good luck bliss, but maybe what it must feel like to leave this world. We drove across town in separate cars, my husband lost behind the curtain of rain. And a new question to the gods, my husband too, you'll take my husband too. Waking in my parents' empty house, Daddy is gone. Have I not been a good daughter? Sissy brought his body back in a box unceremoniously, like having just come from running an errand. Somehow I'm expected to walk the streets of my city without daddy in it. I trudge like climbing out of a quicksand. Again, grief and the great unlet go of it. I don't know what to do with my father's body in the house with no one in it. I look out the window and a black fox trots across the yard. Rains again. Do I now inherit his earth? This second poem that I like to read is in the anthology Lift Every Voice. I moved to New York City in 2007 and believed I was running away from the South that raised me. It turns out I was homesick. In my longing, I wrote epistolary or letter poems to my gone, to the past, and to other unnamed loves. And those letters make up the bulk of Weary Kingdom. But here's the poem, Dear, that's in the anthology. Dear, my grandma taught me to give ourselves room. Belt should have extra loops, shoes an inch of give. If we keep ourselves in a space not fit for keeping, we'll be crushed. I never liked shoes or the South. I want to walk one day. I am sitting here trying to understand I only loved you because you remind me of home and why I cannot go back. I cannot dial your number and whisper hello. You know I am sad when things break and cannot be mended. Your laughter at my sadness hurts also. Hasn't the city taught me enough about breaking or wilderness to survive as to be stone-faced, not tender? I want soft hands. But the city has given me tough palms and cold bones because I packed away my coats prematurely, wishing for Aprils and Mays and bare shoulders. I know things come and go as they please. Winter will stay. The daffodils sprouted too soon and now gone. I keep trying to remember the last 3 digits of your phone number, but I can't. Right now, my windows are open and jazz plays in the Harlem streets. I find it impossible not to want or miss what is familiar. The sweet tea you keep in your New York fridge, my father's holiday grilling, magnolia blossoms. I know damn well it's all gone. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My Igbo name is Afaa, and I am happy to be a part of this honoring of a very long tradition of African-American poetry. That's my Igbo name, Afaa. My Chinese name is Hui Yafeng. And I'd like to begin by paying tribute to someone who was a major influence of mine for a long time, and a friend, I'd say. Amiri Baraka, one of the main architects of the Black Arts Movement. And this is an early poem of his. It's entitled Preface to a 20-volume suicide note for Kelly Jones, born 16th of May, 1959. Lately, I've become accustomed to the way the ground opens up and envelops me each time I go out to walk the dog, or the broad-edged, silly music the wind makes when I run for a bus. Things have come to that. And now, each night I count the stars, and each night I get the same number. And when they will not come to be counted, I count the holes they leave. Nobody sings anymore. And then last night, I tiptoed up to my daughter's room and heard her talking to someone. And when I opened the door, there was no one there, only she on her knees, peeking into her own clasped hands. The second poem that I like to read, and this will be the only poem of mine I'll read, is in the anthology, and I need to contextualize it a bit. I wrote this poem in 1997 during the time that I was teaching at Cave Camp. Elizabeth Alexander and I came in to help Toy and Cornelius. And I was on my way to being named Cave Camp's first elder, although I was still in my 40s. And Lucille Clifton, another mentor of mine, became the second elder. And it refers to a moment in my life in 1978 to 79 when I made another major step towards engaging Chinese culture. And I had started reading the Tao Te Ching in 1973. And in the fall of 1978, I started studying Tai Chi Chuan. And through that period of my life, and for much of my life, I have had to work to recover from what's known as complex PTSD. The components are child trauma for me, the social trauma of the 1960s, which was my adolescence, and my military service in 1970 to 73. And I became convinced once I had gotten firmly rooted or beginning to get rooted in Tai Chi that it could be part of a major vehicle in Chinese culture for my recovery. And it has proven to be just that and more. And but at the time, my family had no understanding of Tai Chi, and they had wanted me to continue with another therapeutic program. So my negotiation with my family away from their system into one that I chose and one that I had faith would work for me put me on my own singular path. And this poem is entitled Inside the Blues Whale. And on the Poetry Foundation website, it's dedicated to Vincent Woodard and the year 1978 to 1979, referring, of course, to that period in my life. It is not just my problem. It belongs to us all. I have been cajoled into coming to the emergency room where everything scares me. Black folks shoot and cut each other until they end here where guards have guns. I refuse to be taken upstairs and locked away. I was trying to think of a poem. It got me to this place. With my mother, I stand against the wall, guards on either side. They have guns. And this is my mother. It is now everybody's problem. A bird is singing in my hair, more important than Thorazine. My head is a tree stretching its leaves to burn in the sun. They say if I make a treaty to take the medicine, I can leave with my family since my family is crazy. I look at the guns on the hips of the guards and know I must be as still and quiet as death, or this will turn into psychosis as sick as nightmares. I am angry that they would have me here with my mother, angry at white doctors. I am in a whale inside in the ocean. Who can swim out to me? Who can cast a line? If I take out the first guard by breaking his neck, I can protect my mother, but it is more important that we are all now underwater, inside a whale who laughs. Later, the therapist they say likes me keeps talking about the appointment. She is doing something subliminal with the word come, repeating. She leans to me when she says it. It bothers me that such people think crazy people are stupid, but it is more important that my head is a tree with a bird singing in it inside a whale in the ocean. The most important thing of all is that this whale that ate us likes to laugh a lot. He has the blues. And in closing, I like to say I offer the reading of that poem to a country that has a daily increasing rate of mental illness. And for anyone who struggle with such things, given that there's so little understanding and not enough kindness and compassion. So thank you.
Original, ragged, round, rich, robust. He had the Hawkman's eyes. We gasped. We saw the maleness raking out and making guttural the air and pushing us to walls. And in a soft and fundamental hour, a sorcery devout and vertical, beguiled the world. He opened us, who was a key, who was a man. I selected this poem because I think specifically Malcolm X is somebody that is just always just in the ethos, sort of always on your mind. But I think as of late, it just made me think about the time we're in, and someone who left this earth in 1965. And here we are, years later, still struggling and toiling with many of the same things that he saw to be problematic. So I feel like Malcolm X as a figure and as a person needs to be like revisited. So this was a way for me to get to revisit Brother Malcolm.
Peace, family, everyone who's watching. Jessica Moore, really honored to be here today. I'm going to read two pieces, one from the anthology. My work, although it's not in the anthology, I know that I'm an extension and a part of the African American poetic tradition as a longtime Black book publisher and poet. So greetings from Detroit. And this is June Jordan. I must become a menace to my enemies. I will not walk politely on the pavements anymore. And this is dedicated in particular to those who hear my footsteps or the insubstantial rattling of my grocery cart, then turn around, see me, and hurry on away from this impressive terror I must be. I plan to blossom bloody on an afternoon surrounded by my comrades singing terrible revenge and merciless accelerating rhythms. But I have watched a blind man studying his face. I have set the table in the evening and sat down to eat the news regularly. I have gone to sleep. There is no one to forgive me. The dead do not give a damn. I live like a lover who drops her dime into the phone just as the subway shakes into the station, wasting her message, canceling the question of her call, fulminating or forgetting, but late. And always after the fact that could save or condemn me, I must become the action of my fate too. How many of my brothers and my sisters will they kill before I teach myself retaliation? I must become a menace to my enemies. Shall we pick a number? South Africa, for instance. Do we agree that more than 10,000 in less than a year, but that less than 5,000 slaughtered in more than 6 months will? What is the matter with me? I must become a menace to my enemies. 3. And if I let you slide, who should be extirpated from my universe? Who should be cauterized from earth completely? Law and order jerk-offs of the first, the terrorist degree, then let my body fail my soul in its bedeviled lecheries. And if I ever let love go, because the hatred and the whisperings become a phantom, dictate I obey in lieu of impulse and realities, the blossoming flamingos of my wild mimosa trees, then let love freeze me out. I must become a menace to my enemies. I love June Jordan. It's a very gangster poem, and I think very fitting for the times. And so I'm going to read a poem from my 5th book, We Want Our Bodies Back. And I want to just say that as a Black poet who finally gave her collection to a larger press like HarperCollins, I'm really proud in that I'm the first Black woman poet since Gwendolyn Brooks that they published, which means we have more anthologies that need to be edited and more revolutionary voices that need to be published. And so this is We Want Our Bodies Back for Sandra Bland. If Black women could be cut down, removed gently from American terrorism, who would break our fall? Which direction will we travel to feel safe? Wild is the wind. If we could turn in this skin, these sharpened bones, this brain full of power and history, who would we resemble? Invisible doesn't come in Black. How many nervous breakdowns? How many funeral black dresses? How many fibroids? How many nooses? How many of our bodies must be raped, cut into pieces, burned inside garbage bags, buried? How many of us blossom a beautiful tree of life and pray their pride isn't cut down the middle, reduced to trunks, or a close friend doesn't die climbing the limbs, attempting to simply grow outside the gritty soil they were planted? I put a spell on you. Holly hobby ovens, Girl Scout cookies, and Barbie dolls. Don't prepare our revolutionary daughters born with capes and wings to have a pig's knee pushed into their backs. Girls raised by wolves, taught to disappear, to be quiet, to not talk about it. How much black breath is allowed space in the state of Texas, a place that has sucked the life out of countless miscounted brown poor women die here. I got life. Sandra Bland got the death penalty for a traffic stop. Her body was 28 years young. How to make sense of our bodies. Bodies burned by cigarettes. Bodies smoked out their own neighborhoods. Bodies with abandoned lungs and hearts. Bodies mistaken for women when they are still girls. How do we construct a survival guide, a poem for our daughters' bodies without throwing up our breakfast? How do our mothers' bodies not implode after telling our sons to comply, to not speak, to keep their heads down, to allow their bodies to be dragged by racist police? Jim Crow ain't never flown with this much wingspan. Egos running for safety now, for the reach is deep in Southern and Midwest. Shadows the East, lands in the West. Texas, you will always be Mexico in denial. Poet Ron Allen asked for his body back in 1996, and we are still waiting. We want our bodies back. We want our bodies back. We want our bodies back. We want them returned to mothers without blood, without brains exposed, without humiliation, without bruises, without glass, without fire. We want our bodies back. We want our cities back, our culture back, our land back, our streets back. We want our freedom. We want our justice. We want our bodies back. We want our bodies back. We want our bodies back. We want them wrapped in white silk. We want them paraded around the White House. We want those flags you stand up for baseball games at half-mast. We want national holidays to honor our bodies, our knees, our prayers, our eyes, our genitals, our eyes, our fingers, our feet. We want 21 gun salutes when we enter a room. We want our bodies back. We want them anointed in oils. We want them worn around your neck. We want them remembered. We want them worship on Sunday. We want our magic you try to bottle. We want our essence you attempt to steal, our elegance, our sex, our walk, our cool, our recipes, our intelligence, science, our stars, our history. I want my Moroccan nose. I want my holy water breast. I want my Maasai legs. I want my alien arms. I want my Ivory Coast mouth. I want our breath back. I want our time back. I want your foot off our girls' back. I want all your badges back. I want you to evaporate into dust like swatted moths. Don't cut me down from the noose. Let my legs dangle for the devil. What a spectacular magic show. Why you turn the cameras off? Why you turn the cameras off? This is a simple ballet. You got front row. This is your venue. This cell, this hole is no one's home. It's no place for a woman to die. You probably never heard of Judith Jameson, Catherine Dunham. Oh, we know how to get our legs in the air. We know how to elevate, use our bodies to tell a story of middle passage, of survivals, of lynchings. You have always left our bodies under your control. Don't you touch me. Don't you take me down. Don't touch my body. Don't touch my music. Don't touch my patience. Don't touch my car door. Don't come near my window. Don't talk to me in that tone. This body of work got work to do. I'm resurrecting my body in new forms daily. Watch for me in your deepest sleep. Black is the color of my true love's hair. Listen for my songs, watch for my walk, listen for my voice, my black girl attitude, watch my body resist your death traps, watch me rise, watch my rebirth, watch us rise up from this new Jim Crow, from these new unspoken apartheid laws. We want our bodies back, we want our bodies back. We will take them, protect them, remember them, remember you, Sandra Bland. We will never forget your brown body, your mind, your pride, your spirit, your love, your vow to do God's work. We want your drive from Illinois to Waller County back. We want all our daughters back, and we want them back now. Thank you, Schomburg, for having me. I love everyone on this lineup. Blessings.
I just want to say thanks to the Schomburg and Kevin for bringing me on this amazing cipher we got going tonight. And I'm gonna go back a little while and tag an ancestor in here named Langston Hughes, who wrote a poem 85 years ago that's so relevant today because of its title, which is adverse to the title we see people wearing on these ridiculous hats. So This is entitled, Let America Be America Again. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great, strong land of love where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. I am the young man full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the man, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker, sold to the machine. I am the Negro, servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean, hungry, yet today, despite the dream, beaten yet today, oh, pioneers. I am the man who never got ahead. The poorest worker bartered through the years, yet I'm the one who dreamt our basic dream in the old world while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true that even yet its mighty daring sings in every brick and stone, in every furrow turned that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I'm the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shore, and Poland's plain, and England's grassy lea, and torn from Black Africa's strand I came to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay, for all the dreams we've dreamed and all the songs we've sung and all the hopes we've held and all the flags we've hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again. The land that never has been yet, and yet must be. The land where every man is free. The land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. From those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again. America, oh yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we, the people, must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and endless plain, all the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. That's my man Langston from 1935. His birthday's 120th birthday is coming up on February 1st of next year. And this next poem I'm going to read is a poem of my own, and I think it was jarred loose by the very disturbing headlines that we've seen in the newspaper over the past few days. And the title is Blood Moon. And the epigraph comes from Don Wooten, who is the ICE whistleblower, who blew the whistle on the secret hysterectomies that are happening under ICE supervision. And the first epigraph is, everybody he sees has a hysterectomy, just about everybody. The second epigraph is from testimony from Project South subjects who were prisoners of ICE. This was like an experimental concentration camp. It was like they're experimenting with our bodies. Blood Moon. The hysterectomized uteruses of the women held in ICE captivity cried softly in their garbage bags, huddled, bloody, and severed. They had only each other to cling to in the medical waste dump. They shared their stories of birthing, of menstruous moons. They held each other, hold in the darkness of human debris, and knew in a way that can only be known in the workshop of the womb, the story of all their past and all their mothers' past back to the beginning. The bone, muscle, tendon, and hair wisps of what had grown to be human. They saw their almost futures, and then they saw the certain future of the incinerator that awaited them, that had awaited wombs of Mississippi, North Carolina, Puerto Rico, and Indian health services. They knew the sterilizing fire that awaited them to scorch Possibility Way, and they wailed in a way only the burning future can wail. And when they heard themselves and bled their wails together, they did what they were born to do, to rise beyond their would-be bone and skin and muscle. They rise together from America's incarceration, unfurling from beneath hypodermics and gauze, piercing through plastic tubing and shit-stained tissue, rising beyond razor wire, concrete blocks, and security cameras. They cross every border to wail alongside uterine ghosts from Georgia to Auschwitz, the way the light of every moon smuggles through checkpoints without passports or ID, carrying only its own shine on its back, doing the work we mostly close our eyes to. And when the harvest moon waxes to remind us how we've eaten from the hands of those blood-bound to the garbage dump, we pray and eat our fill. And when the blood moon rises to remind us of what we've allowed in the name of borders, who will pray for us? Who will hear us when we wail? Thank you.
Thank you all for coming and listening tonight. What a powerful, as Tyehimba just eloquently said, cipher you were treated to, and we all were. I think back to the ring shout tradition, African-American religious life, and we heard a ring shout, a cipher. We heard about America and the spirit. We heard about violence and peace. And I think a lot about Jericho Brown's wonderful phrase, the poet's role is to tell the truth. And we heard lots of truth tonight. I hope you come visit us online. I hope soon you'll get to visit us at Malcolm X Boulevard. But the spirit of the Schomburg Center lives on. It's our 95th year, and we're really happy to celebrate this 250 years of African-American verse and poetry. Please join us soon next week for the Literary Festival. You can find all those details at schomburg.org. And thank you and good night.